Hey, what's up, everybody? Steve Schwartz here from LSAT Unplugged, joining you today to share your 170 plus LSAT study plan. For those who don't know, at LSAT Unplugged, we offer live online classes via Zoom, small group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and on-demand video courses. Check out the links below this video to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd love to help you out. So your 170 plus LSAT study plan, here we go. All of my recommended LSAT study plans follow the LASER approach to LSAT prep. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. And it is really important that you follow all of these steps in this exact order. Far too many students jump straight to taking exam after exam, measuring their results, being happy or sad about those results, and then moving on to the next exam. They neglect review, and they neglect learning and accuracy and individual sections. In a way, it's like putting the cart before the horse. You've got to build the foundation first, and that's what the learning phase of the LASER approach helps you do. In the learning phase, you are focused on building a strong familiarity with the different LSAT sections, the different LSAT question types. At this point, students are typically using one of those 500-page phone book-sized LSAT prep textbooks, or maybe they're using one of the free courses like Khan Academy, something like that. In truth, it doesn't really matter what you use to build the foundation at this point, because you're just learning, okay, logic games are on the exam, logical reasoning's on the exam, and reading comp is on the exam. Cool. Then you're learning about the different question types on the exam. Of course, some resources do it better than others, but any misconceptions you get from using a low-quality resource, you can typically make up for later. That being said, of course, it would save you some time if you studied the right way from the beginning. I actually wrote an LSAT prep book of my own called Mastering the LSAT. It's available on Amazon for something like $10. I tried to keep it as brief and concise as possible in contrast to those 500-page books. So check that book out, linked below this video, to get a strong foundation in the basics from the beginning. I also have on-demand video courses where I boil it down similarly into short videos covering each section of the exam and each LSAT question type to help you out at this phase of your LSAT prep journey. So that's learning. Next is accuracy. Accuracy is doing individual questions by type, drilling them to get really clear on what are ordering logic games. Do a bunch of those in the row. What are necessary assumption questions? Do a bunch of those in the row. I have trouble with science reading comp passages. Cool. Do a bunch of those in a row as well. So drilling questions by type is that accuracy phase of the LASER approach. Next, we have S for sections. At this point, you already have a good familiarity with the different LSAT question types. You've drilled them by type. You're pretty clear on each section of the exam and, broadly speaking, each question type. You may not be perfect yet. You may be at something like 70% accuracy, totally fine. At this stage, though, we do have to move on to pacing so that you are getting pretty comfortable with that 35-minute time constraint. Of course, a lot of folks will say, I'm doing great untimed, but then under timed conditions, things fall apart. My response to that is typically something like, well, it's great that you're doing well untimed, but since the exam is timed, we've got to make sure that you're able to translate that accuracy into a timed setting as well. So we don't want to wait too long before getting into the S phase of this LASER approach, individual timed 35-minute sections. Stage 4 is E for exams and endurance. At this point, you are now doing full-length, 4-section timed exams under strict test day conditions. With standard timing, that means you are doing 2 sections back-to-back, then getting a 10-minute break, then 2 more sections back-to-back, then you're done. That puts you at over 2 hours of sitting for the LSAT. Not a cakewalk. At the end of that time, folks are typically burnt out. They're exhausted. They're not going to study any more that day, or at least they shouldn't be studying any more that day. You may be pretty exhausted at the end of that sitting. If you are, totally cool. Most folks are. And for that reason, to get over the endurance, to build up your endurance, you want to do several full-length timed exams before test day, ideally getting at least 10 under your belt. And if you're aiming for 170 plus, I recommend getting at least 20 under your belt before LSAT test day. You could do 1 a week if you're busy, or ideally at least twice a week if you have the space available in your schedule assuming that you have time to review in depth as well. Which brings us to the fifth and final stage of the laser approach to LSAT prep, review. Students typically neglect this one far too much. They'll look at the answer key. They'll say, oh, I get it now. How could I have been so dumb? They clear it out, then they move on to the next thing. But they're not spending enough time truly learning from their mistakes. I have a framework I've developed called the Socratic review method. I integrate it into my coaching and into my courses where we aim to show you how to review better by making sure that you are asking the right questions at every stage of your review process. So if you had trouble in logical reasoning, for example, you want to ask yourself, was my issue with this question in the stimulus, the question stem, or the answer choices? If it was in the stimulus, what threw me off? Was it LSAC's failure to include key indicator words like for the conclusion, for evidence, for sufficient conditions, for necessary conditions? Did they bury the conclusion in the middle of the stimulus? Did they use annoying words like except, unless, until, and without that are not directly sufficient condition indicators or necessary condition indicators and require a little bit of translation? Did the stimulus require taking the contrapositive in order to better link conditional statements together? If your error was in the question stem, was it that LSAC used some confusing wording for that question stem to refer to what is actually a familiar common question stem type? Or is it that you're not clear on what exactly that question stem type is asking you to do? For example, a lot of students are confused about the difference between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions, which are in reality asking for very different things. And finally, the answer choices. You want to ask yourself, what was tempting about the wrong answer choice that made you pick it, and what ultimately makes it wrong? And what was unappealing about the right answer choice that pushed you away from it, and what ultimately makes it correct? So you have traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And with a proper review framework like the Socratic review method, you will be able to smoothly and efficiently walk through every question that gives you difficulty, every question where you're down to 2 and you pick the wrong one, every question when you guessed and got lucky, but it could have just as easily gone the wrong way. So there is a lot of work involved in the review process, a lot of time devoted to it, but this is the biggest bang for your buck you're going to get from your LSAT prep time. Rather than doing another timed exam a week, it's a lot more valuable for you to actually look at the questions that you've already done and go deeper on them. It may not be the most fun thing in the world to do, but it will be the most impactful way for you to get the biggest LSAT score increases. Now let's talk a little bit about how to allocate your time over the course of the week. If you are working or in school, if you're working roughly, let's say 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, or you're a student in college pretty busy over the course of the day, I recommend that you put in typically on average 2 hours a day on weekdays, and then ideally 4 hours a day on the weekends. Now, if you're working full time, for example, you could spend 2 hours a day by allocating 1 hour during lunch and 1 hour in the evenings. If lunchtime is not possible, you can allocate 2 hours in the evenings, Monday to Thursday. On Friday, maybe you knock out an hour before work and an hour during lunch, or an hour in the evening before signing off for the night to relax. On Saturday and Sunday, you could allocate 4 hours by spending 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. or 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Then you're saving up either your morning or your afternoon for other stuff. Do the same thing again on Sunday. If you can only allocate one weekend day and not the other, that's okay. But then recognize that you may want to allow a longer time frame to study for the LSAT. Instead of devoting 3 months, maybe you want to devote 5 or 6 months and study at a slower pace. Same goes for if you have big family obligations or if you're working 2 different jobs or something like that. Ultimately, everyone's LSAT prep schedule will be different depending on their obligations. And if you need to allow more time, don't be afraid to do it. In my experience, the students who get the highest LSAT scores typically study over a longer time frame at a more relaxed pace rather than trying to knock it out in 2 to 3 months. This is not an exam that you can cram for, but if you put in the time, you will get the results, provided that you study the right way. And again, I'd love to help you out. Check out the links below the video to find out more. And if you found this video helpful, please do me a favor, like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help with that YouTube algorithm, and I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, I wish you all the best, and take care. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best, and take care.